talk a little bit about Etsy and actually mostly about business and why I think we need to change the way that we think about business and the way that we practice business. And regarding Etsy.org, how we need to change the way we're teaching people about business. So that's what I'm going to talk about. But let me preface this by saying that I have no formal business education whatsoever. So especially to the young people, you don't have to believe what I'm saying, or to anyone studying business can prove me wrong. All of my business education is just what I've learned by doing it and by reading lots of books. I was a professional musician before Etsy. I played in a rock band, toured around, did that, had a screen printing business with Rob, who is the founder of Etsy. And he asked me to come on and be the marketing person for the company. And I said, at this point, Etsy was just 4 people working out of our apartment in Brooklyn. And I said, I don't know anything about marketing. He said, oh, you'll be perfect then. So I went out and I bought a bunch of marketing books. I was like, this is awful. Like, I don't want to do this at all. And I actually have a moral objection to some of the ways that people advertise. And so I read a bunch of other books on things like permaculture and Buddhism and economics, and I think started saying this is actually a lot better way to be thinking about business, and I was learning a lot. Mostly, though, I just learned by doing. So I spent the last 10 years at Etsy, as I mentioned, starting out when it was just a small group of us working out of our apartment. It's funny, I left the music business to business. It's funny. It was hardly a business. I left barely scraping by as a musician because I wanted to get off the road and stop touring. And I immediately went to work actually touring again, but for Etsy, but really just to go around from town to town and meet the people who were using the site and say, well, what can we build, with you? What do you need? What are you looking for success? And also just to build community, to build relationships with the people who were using our site. So that was really where I learned more than anything else, just going out and talking to people about what we were trying to do. And when Etsy started, there wasn't really a strong social mission behind it. Rob was making furniture, we had the screen printing business, he was making these wooden computers, and he wanted to sell them online, but didn't want to put it on eBay because he felt that it wasn't honoring all the work that he'd put into the products he was making. And so he was just going to build his own website. And he realized that there were so many people who were making things and that they needed a place to sell their things too. So he said, I'm going to make a website for people who make things, and that's it. That was the idea behind Etsy. There wasn't a business plan. The Etsy, to this day, still just charges 20 cents to list an item and takes 3.5% commission when it sells. That's been that model always. And that price comes not from let's do some financial modeling and see what we can do. It was, what does eBay cost? I was like, I don't know, 4%? He's like, we'll make it 3.5%. That was the business plan of Etsy. So it was is a very unusual company, especially then and still now. But really, just going out and talking to people taught me everything that I wanted to know about business. And as Etsy grew larger and larger, I was realizing actually that it was more than just a marketplace for buying and selling handmade goods. It was actually having meaningful economic impact in people's life. And it wasn't just economic impact, it was the impact that came with an artisan being able to spend more time with their family or less time at a job that they hated. It was actually more than that. And as this journey continued through Etsy, I got introduced to writers and like Bill McKibben in the book Deep Economy, which was really kind of eye-opening for me. Someone then introduced me to the work of E.F. Schumacher, and that was really eye-opening for me, especially the essay Buddhist Economics, which is in Small is Beautiful, which I recommend everybody read if they haven't. And I started thinking about, with Etsy, it's really about trying to foster this big number of small human-scale economies rather than this one big global economy that doesn't actually know or honor the people that are hurt by it. And so I started thinking that business is a very powerful way to shape communities. And you can think about it in the really egregious examples, right? Like mountaintop removal, shaping communities in really awful ways. But business can also be a powerful tool for helping people in good ways. Think of Greyston Bakery in Yonkers. I don't know if you all know Greyston. I was there last week. They have an open hiring policy, so anyone who walks in the door can put their name on a list, and when the next job comes up, that person gets the job. They don't care if you've been homeless or are homeless, if you've been a drug addict, they don't care about your past. It's really about creating opportunities. And then they take all of the money that they make with the bakery and invest it into affordable housing, childcare, all of these things. And like, wow, they've really had a meaningful impact in Yonkers since 1982. They really have used that business to shape that community in powerful ways. So I started thinking about the power that business has to shape communities. And over the years at Etsy, we actually evolved the mission we have some really funny missions that were does anyone watch that show, Portlandia? Yeah. Did anyone see The Dream of the 1890s? There was a sketch on that, I don't know what season. But we had an early mission of Etsy that was, we built Etsy to swing the pendulum back to the artisan-rich 19th century and away from the dystopia of mass production. And it was this really kind of like aggro thing, but the sentiment was there. But as I learned more about local economies and the importance of really investing in local economies, I started thinking about the mission of Etsy. So the mission of Etsy became to reimagine commerce in ways that build a lasting and fulfilling world, right? How do we rethink business in order to create a world that's more durable from an ecological, economic, social point of view, and also one that's more joyful, more connected, right? The fulfilling piece. So it was at that point where I really realized that business was this tool, and so can we use business to shape that community? So that was a very pivotal moment for me. This was maybe in 2010 or 2011 where we created this new mission statement. And I started thinking more and more about business and getting more involved with organizations like the Social Venture Network. We became a B Corp. I don't know if you all know what benefit corporations are. We did that, and I got more entrenched in this world and met a lot of amazing businesses who were doing really wonderful things. But I also met a lot of businesses that I felt were just kind of stopping at less bad and being satisfied with that. So if you have this spectrum of business, on one side you have kind of degenerative business, right? This is the mountaintop removals, Volkswagen recently, right? Degenerative in ways. I feel particularly burned by that. My wife is German, and we have one of those cars. And we bought one of those cars specifically at the recommendation of former head of the EPA. I know. And so we were like, and we even got it in white, so it would be, we wouldn't have to cool it as much, and we got it in manual, so we could even be more fuel efficient. And so, anyways, I feel very betrayed by that. And that is, truly degenerative thinking, right? It's not the gas that causes climate change, or the gases that cause climate change, which would be truly reprehensible. It's the ones that actually poison people and cause asthma, which is also truly reprehensible. So it's just like, this is crazy. So clearly business is still practiced in these ways that are degenerative. You move down the spectrum, you have less bad, which is where I feel like a lot of businesses stop, right? 30% less packaging. Well, we should be asking the question, like, if your water bottle has less packages on the top, is that really something you should be applauded for? We should be asking the question, why are we drinking water out of plastic bottles? It's crazy. And we're not going to actually address all of the things that Dr. Barber was talking about: inequality, climate change, depression and disconnection, all of these things that I feel are actually byproducts of the way that we practice business and the way we consume on some level. By being less bad, right? We can't 30% less package our way through climate change. It's not realistic. So we need to continue further down the spectrum. So then you have sustainable business, which would be great, but I also don't think we should aspire to sustain the world that we have right now, right? Because of all of these things that we've done. So how do we actually set our sights a little higher and move towards not just trying to avoid the worst possible scenario, but building the world that we actually want, one that is the one that I think Dr. Barber alluded to, one that is based on moral and connection and all of these things. So I've been thinking a lot about this idea of regenerative business, or business as tool to regenerate communities. And my belief is actually that the way we need to do this kind of work is in place. We need to be focused on small, place-based economies where we actually know and honor the people and these places when we do work. So what does it mean to be regenerative? This is something that I've been thinking a lot about, and it's hard. I don't know if it's ever truly achievable to have a totally regenerative enterprise, but I think that's where we should be aspiring, or that's what we should be. What is it? We should be aspiring to be. Yeah. Sorry, it is nervous. It's nerve-wracking up here. So I started thinking about it down that spectrum that I mentioned, and in a way, it is net positive, right? It's net positive in all of the ways, right? You have business and things come in, and you have these various stakeholders, and you should create net positive impact for all of them. But I don't think that really goes deep enough, because I think it actually divorces the individual from this. And to me, regenerative is about first recognizing the fact that we live in an interconnected and interdependent system. And we have to look at actually all of these very complex systems and realize that if we're optimizing for ourselves at the expense of anyone else in that system, we're actually harming ourselves. And we're not just harming those people. So it's about taking that systems view of the world and then using enterprise as a tool to actually regenerate all the parts of that system, including yourself. It needs to be of your own essence and of your own soul. And that's why I feel like when we're thinking about business now, we really need to bring a lot of radical self-inquiry into it, around values, around purpose. We need to bring more spirituality to business and be unafraid to talk about it that way. Because I feel like we've somehow divorced ourselves from business, and that somehow allows us to rationalize all the awful things that we do. So how do we bring that deeper essence into it? And if you do work that's of your essence, I feel like you can actually be regenerating yourself as you regenerate the communities where you're practicing. So that's what Etsy.org is all about. So a few months ago, well, I guess it's been almost a year now, almost a year ago when we knew that Etsy was going to go public, and that's a whole other story. Chad, the CEO, asked me what an Etsy foundation would look like, or we have an opportunity to fund something, what would we do? So I thought a lot about it, and my first thought, was not let's build a nonprofit. It was let's build another business, because business can be this powerful engine. And a lot of the ideas that I had for it actually are things that Etsy is doing, Etsy.com is doing, and we didn't need a separate entity to do it, which was actually really affirming for me. But one place where I thought we weren't focusing was on business education. David Orr, who you all probably know or have read, and if you haven't, you should, once said that the skills, aptitudes, and attitudes necessary to industrialize the earth are not the same as those that are going to be needed to heal the earth, build good economies, and durable communities, something like that. And I really took that to heart, and I realized that we have been preparing entrepreneurs to really perpetuate so much of what's really, I think, destroying the world. Everything's about how big can we become and how quickly. Everything's got to scale. And I wanted to question some of those assumptions and say, we need to not only change what we're teaching people, but we need to bring the self, the wisdom of self, and the wisdom of the systems and all that's wrong with the systems, to shift consciousness around business, to shift views of what success looks like, to really cultivate that view of the world as interconnected and interdependent, because that's what's going to be required to actually use business in these ways that are regenerative. Without that consciousness shift, I don't think it's going to happen. So how do we bring that personal development work and that cultivation of empathy into business, that articulation of ethics and values and all of these things that seem to be lacking from so much business education today? And then not just teach business skills, but cultivate more wisdom. That's something Schumacher said too. If we have more education than ever, and we have more knowledge than ever, but we have more ecological destruction, more wealth inequality, all of those things I was just talking about than ever. If any more education is going to save us, it needs to teach wisdom. It needs to be about wisdom, not just knowledge. And so how do we bring more wisdom to business education? So we launched Etsy.org in June, and we're running our first class right now. We have 23 entrepreneurs who are going through a 16-week program in Brooklyn. And what I think is really exciting about this is that you have these other incubator programs and things, and they're all about how do we make the next app that's going to get our food here 3 minutes faster. And I'm thinking about all of this incredible intellectual capital that's being wasted on this stuff that nobody needs. And no one's focusing on the baker and the local candlestick maker. Sorry, what's the butcher, the baker? Sorry. And so that's what we want to focus on, businesses that are actually knowing and honoring the places where they're doing business. And I think if we build a big number of these regenerative place-based economies, that's actually how we're going to build this more livable world. And to Dr. Barber's point mostly too, it's going to actually be everybody. It has to be inclusive of everybody. And if you really take an interconnected, interdependent view of the world or of your community, that includes everybody in that community. So these programs need to actually recognize that. So the ultimate plan with everything that we're doing is to open source the whole model, to share the curriculum, all of the content, the facilitator instructions, and not put it online to do online education, but to allow any group of people in place to build their own business school based on these principles. And so it's not just place-based, it's also place-sourced from the people that are in that community. So I've got about 2 minutes here, and so I guess I'll leave you with a parting thought, especially to the young people sitting before me who might be starting businesses in the future. I would encourage, actually, but it's really for everybody, and investors, consumers, right, all of us, to think about building or supporting businesses that are really needed by a community, and that aren't just aiming to be less bad, but are actually aiming to regenerate the whole, and yourself, right? To understand what really makes you happy, and to explore some notions of what success looks like, and that maybe success shouldn't be measured only in the financial gain that you get from it. And finally, when you're thinking about these businesses, knowing the difference between big and great. That was a deep ecology, one of the deep ecology principles, but I think it's very true for business. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.